The second incredibly helpful thing to have in mind around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice conversations is history and common language. Too often, disagreements or offense occurs because we are talking using the same words and not meaning the same things. For example, racism or oppression. There are actually three types: systemic, institutional, and interpersonal that are most frequently referred to. Systemic oppression is the type that happens in a very large system. For example, the lack of equitable funding in school systems in Pennsylvania, the hospital system and how insurance works, the transportation system and how it disadvantages certain individuals based on where they live, their ability, its cost. Institutional oppression or institutional racism, when we're specifically talking about people's skin color, is what happens in a particular organization or building. If there's a particular congregation that has rules and regulations still in its books, its constitution, if there is a particular school that has an admission policy that is biased against a certain group of individuals. Interpersonal is about two people, where one person says something awful, refuses to hire, fires, evicts, or acts of violence against another human. So when we talk about, I'm not racist, I'm not oppressive, we're often referring to, I don't do these things individually. I don't use or practice interpersonal racism or interpersonal oppression intentionally. But that doesn't mean that we are not also part of an institution that may be causing harm, and therefore we need to examine what is our place in that, how might we be involved in making change, and certainly with systems. What are some of the systems that our country might be engaged in? Our political party, our civic group. How might we be part of being positive change in that system? Or are we not using our voices, our gifts and talents, and therefore letting things happen that we know are fundamentally at some level unjust? Things like the history of enslavement and the transatlantic slave trade, or segregation, these are frequently issues that I've heard folks say, I didn't do it. It's so far in the past. It was terrible, but how can I be a part of that today? What can I do? Well, unfortunately, we can often start in our own communities. For example, if we worship in a church that was built before 1968, our church building at one time had a sign on it that said, Black and brown individuals use a different entrance, sit up in the balcony, or don't come in at all. If we've never discussed that, if we're not aware of it when we talk about celebrating our building anniversaries or the anniversary of our faith community, and we don't recognize that we were part of a system, that we were an institution that caused harm, we're not being honest, and we are practicing a selective remembrance of our own history. It starts at home. Two of the other vocabulary words that often cause challenge in group conversation are bias and privilege. The thing is, we all have them. Even as an LGBTQIA+ multicultural Black woman, I have privilege when it comes to being able-bodied, when it comes to education, when it comes to Christian privilege. I not only get my days for church off from my regular Monday to Friday job, but I'm able to go out in public and wish people a happy religious holiday like Christmas or Easter. I can easily find cards and decorations in mainline big box stores. I never have been harassed in the street for wearing a symbol of my faith, like a cross necklace or even a clerical collar. The same is not true for my Muslim, my Sikh, or my Jewish friends who can't even go to the grocery store and get food they're able to eat, or wear clothing that reflects their religious and cultural beliefs without being threatened, harassed, or refused service. Christian privilege is one of the biggest areas of privilege I live with and benefit from daily, so I have to be aware of that. Bias is something we all also have as well. That just means what is normal to you, assuming it's normal to anyone else. That's a bias. I automatically associate in my mind peanut butter goes with jelly, but some people prefer it with honey or bananas. Now, if I say, that's weird, that's my bias showing. If I say, that's gross, that's disgusting, I've now crossed past bias and gone into prejudice, assuming that my normal is everyone else's normal, that my normal is obviously the right way. That's my bias. I simply like my way best. When I cross over into saying that not only is my way normal, it's everyone else's normal, and it's better, it is superior to any other way of doing things, that's when my bias would become prejudice. It can be challenging for folks to realize that we all have bias, but there's some great tests, again, easy to Google online, the Harvard bias tests, that show lots of different ways we can have bias. And these tests, excellent science behind them, are free to take and very easy, short, and cover a variety of topics. So that's a great pre-workshop activity or an awareness-raising activity that you can use with small groups, congregational, or team members. So again, a short review. History and common language. Super important way to make sure that we're having helpful conversations and dialogues around justice issues. Recognizing the difference between systemic, institutional, and interpersonal oppression. And helpful working definitions and understandings of bias and privilege, which almost all of us have, at least some, and learning more about those, making peace with them, and committing to develop empathy and practice empathy intentionally in spaces because of that. And then also reckoning with our own history, our family's history, our community's history, our cultural group's history, knowing that there are multiple sides to every story. So we've covered scene setting, and we've covered history and common language. The final tip, tactics. This is my favorite 3-step process: awareness, education, and action. Why do I put it in that order? Because too often we want to dive right into action and then can actually end up committing harm because we're using terminology or phrases that are not helpful with marginalized groups. We're partnering with organizations that may not have the endorsement of individuals who are from that community, in that community. We may also engage in issues that we're very passionate about, but are they relevant in our community? Is that what is most needed, most accessible for others to plug into as a shared ministry in our area, in our region? If we start by raising our awareness, who is in the community? What are the demographics there? Census data, free, available online publicly, can be really helpful in this. What cultural groups, language groups, ethnic groups, what percentage of veterans, unhoused people, folks who are senior or youth, people living on disability and living below the poverty line? If you find out who is near you, you can more easily find out who is already serving and supporting and partnering with these individuals. How can we come alongside them, learn from them, accompany them? How can we work with communities instead of doing things for them, as if we were the saviors, not the learners and the friends and the neighbors? Once we raise awareness and understand the needs in our community, then we can begin to educate ourselves. Again, centering the voices, the perspectives, and the experience of folks that are actually from the communities we want to learn more about supporting and partnering with. Once we have the education that we need, we've learned from speakers, community organizations, different first-person narrative books, movies, engagement in these communities, attending and supporting events, fairs, festivals, plenty of opportunities, then we can be inspired to action, motivated to actively support initiatives that have been requested by those communities that we're seeking to support. So, scene setting, history and common language, and tactics. I have a couple of challenges for you. Practice doing that best practice introduction. How can you work that into your daily exchanges? What might it mean? Where might you place your pronouns? On your Zoom name label, in your email signature, on name tags at different events in your congregation, forms that you have individuals fill out? How might you incorporate a land acknowledgement into different spaces? Do you have a way that individuals can name accommodations that would support them in the different meeting spaces that you gather in? There's lots of ways that we can incorporate authentic introduction into our daily interactions, and especially into our group dialogues. Are there safe spaces that you can partner with near your congregation or create safer spaces in it? What type of artwork is on the wall? How is Jesus represented? What kind of music is played? What are the colors, the types of furniture? Is your space authentically welcoming to individuals besides a small centered set? What are favorite community agreements that you would love to use? Google a few examples and choose some of the things that would be really helpful to you in a meeting. Ask some others in the next few meetings you're in. What are the community agreements you already have in place but may be unspoken? What might it mean to write those down, to reinforce them at the beginning of every meeting? Does it help hold space more intentionally? In our history and common language, I really encourage checking out those Harvard anti-bias tests and also spending some time meditating on what are the areas that you have privilege. What are the communities that you might not be as empathetic with, or that you need to do more work to learn about because they have struggles and challenges in daily life that you don't? And in tactics, you can begin awareness right at home. What are some of the things that you could be more aware of with individuals in your household, your friend group? Have you checked in with your colleagues, your volunteer teams? It's been a very challenging election season. It's been particularly challenging for school students and families in our school system post-COVID. Who are the groups that you could be checking in with and saying, what do I need to know? How can I accompany you? I just want you to know that I care, and I'm here if there's anything that I can do to be of active support. I hope that these thoughts and exercises have been helpful, and that even before you begin to have the conversation, you can now have a healthy, helpful, authentic space where people will engage and the fruits of your labor will not be in vain. God be with you, my friends.